All right, well, good evening, everybody. I have a fun concert planned for you, and hopefully things will go well. I have been having strange Wi-Fi issues for the last few days. So fingers crossed that my internet does not go out completely. We'll see what happens. I did make a few phone calls just to try and prepare for tonight's virtual concert, which is called More Treasures from the Sheet Music Collection. I know I have done this theme at least once before, maybe twice. It allows me to play some fun new music for you and also take a lot of requests. So, hey, Kylan says, smash that thumbs up. Yes, please and thank you. I'm going to start with a fun old ragtime song tonight. I just happened to pull this out earlier this week. Here's the original copy of it. From 1912. They gotta quit kicking my dog around. And if you look closely, believe it or not, this was published by the Stark Music Company. That's John Stark, Scott Joplin's music publisher. And this is the first edition. It took me a while to find that because the song was such a hit that Whitmark music publisher bought the song only a few months after it came out. Now, this was written by a woman who was in the Stark family, Carrie Stark. I think her maiden name was Carrie Brueggemann, something like that. Only she wrote it under a fake name. It says, music by Cy Perkins. She said, well, that sounds like a real good hillbilly name, and it's a kind of a hillbilly-like song. They gotta quit kicking my dog around. Thank you so much. They gotta quit kicking my dog around. Makes no difference if he is a hound. They gotta quit kicking my dog around. It was used by some long-forgotten Missouri politician as his theme song when it came out in 1912. Yeah, good hillbilly music. That's what someone's saying here on YouTube. Really, it's a ragtime song, but it does have a kind of a hillbilly flavor to it. I was listening to a recording of the New Christie Minstrels earlier this week, which is what made me think about playing that song. They covered it years later in the 1960s. I do kind of have a weakness for the New Christie Minstrels. And I'd love to find the man that led the band. Randy Sparks is still living. I would really love to talk to him while he's still around, but I haven't been able to find his address, so I can write him a letter. Maybe one of you internet sleuths can help me out with that. My internet service here is just terrible. It has been that way for a long time. I have done everything possible to stop the internet interruptions. It looks like we're good for the moment. Let me try one more time. Okay, I want to play this piece for you. Now, I have been looking for the original sheet music for this for a long time, so it fits into my theme for tonight. And this came out in 1919. I believe it was written by Harry Richman, who was the famous vaudevillian of the 20s and 30s, although the name is spelled a little bit differently. It's spelled Reichman, R-E-I-C-H. And this is really a novelty piano solo called A Bunch of Keys. Thank you very much. Well, I guess you got the whole tune. That's great. Things are looking up. A Bunch of Keys by Harry Richman. And in fact, I'm going to play another one of his songs later tonight. Harry Richman later went on to become a big star at MGM Studios, and he is the man who introduced the song Puttin' on the Ritz in the movie of the same name. Well, before I play any more songs, let me make a quick announcement. I do accept virtual tips for these concerts. No obligation, but if you're so inclined, there is PayPal and Venmo information in the postings on all three websites. Yeah, I've got a number of birthdays I might ought to do tonight. Well, Kelly Kaufman had a birthday recently in Florida, and I understand Elaine Miller's birthday is this week as well. I try not to I don't know, single out too many people when I'm doing my concerts, but let me play happy birthday for all of them right now. How about that? Happy birthday, dear Kelly and Elaine, and anyone else, and many more. Okay, tell you what I'm going to do next. I get requests every so often from one of my listeners named Bernie to play a song called Love Nest. Now, this was written in 1924, I believe. Yeah, for a Broadway musical called Mary. I do have the original sheet music, and I've played it a number of times, but I thought what I might do this time to give a little bit of a different performance of this song is that I would play you a piano roll of the song. So here's the original roll on the keynote label. This is just a pre-arranged piano roll. In other words, it's not hand-played. And that doesn't mean it's not good. It's very enjoyable to listen to. Words by Otto Harbach, music by Louis A. Hirsch. Most people know it because it was George and Gracie's theme song, Love Nest. It's really a beautiful tune. And the roll will sound extra good tonight because I just had my piano tuned and voiced by Chris Drury yesterday. He did a magnificent job on it. And so let's listen to this piano roll now. The Love Nest. Well, that's a pretty good roll, isn't it? And it sounds beautiful since the piano has just been tuned. If you have never listened to my concerts before, this is a 1913 Apollo. All right, well, the next tune that I would like to play for you is something that, coincidentally, I learned off a player piano roll. In fact, I'll show you the roll since it's sitting right here. I'm not going to play the roll for you. I'm going to play it myself. This is a piano roll of a tune that was never released during the original period, but was recut years later. I think this came out of the collection of my friend Mike Montgomery. And this is a kind of a really neat early jazz tune from about 1918, co-written by J. Russell Robinson, a popular songwriter who would go on to write such hits as Margie, and Spencer Williams from New Orleans. And this piano roll is hand played by Russell Robinson. Years later, in the 1950s, I thought it was a really neat arrangement. And this tune has some very unusual harmonies, especially for the time when it originally came out in 1918. It's called Ringtail Blues. There were some jazz bands at the time that recorded it, and I don't remember if I've even played this on any of my virtual concerts, so I worked on it this afternoon. We'll see how it goes. Ringtail Blues. I also have the original sheet music, so it fits in for tonight's concert. Thank you very much. Ringtail Blues. Isn't that a neat piece? I haven't played it in a while, and it's one of those tunes that's actually a little more difficult than it sounds. It was a very unusual tune for the time, 1918. Well, as always, I'm happy to take requests for tonight. You know, any kind of standard tunes that you can think of. There's a good chance that I have the original sheet music in my collection, so it fits in for the theme of tonight's concert tonight. I really don't know how many rolls I have. Leo's asking me the question, how many rolls are in my collection. I don't think it's much more than about 1,500 or 2,000 rolls, but that's because I focus on trying to collect pretty specifically rare ragtime rolls and early jazz and blues, hand-played rolls specifically, and only 88-note rolls. I do have some 65-note rolls, but not very many, and no reproducing rolls. That means no duo or epical rolls. There's no point because I can't play them. Now, I see a request for Blue-Eyed Sally. I certainly could play that. You know, that might be fun. Leo, I'll do that for you tonight. This is a song written by J. Russell Robinson. I already did one of his pieces. He wrote this with his vaudeville partner, Al Bernard, who was from New Orleans. They were called the Dixie Stars, and this was the biggest hit they ever had, Blue-Eyed Sally, 1924. And with it, another song that the Dixie Stars sang. I'll just do the chorus. It's a pretty tune called Let Me Be the First to Kiss You Good Morning and the Last to Kiss You Good Night. much. That's Blue-Eyed Sally. And another tune called Let Me Be the First to Kiss You Good Morning and the Last to Kiss You Good Night. Those are songs by the Dixie Stars, Al Bernard and J. Russell Robinson, two of my favorite songwriters and performers. I have spent a lot of time and money over the last 10 or 12 years collecting their music. I have 2 entire boxes full of nothing but songs by Robinson and Al Bernard. And I'm always looking for more. Now, I got a request prior to the concert tonight to do one of the great oriental foxtrot hits of the 1910s. That's kind of when the craze for oriental foxtrot started, and it went all through the 1920s. So I thought I'd do a whole medley of these songs for you. I'm going to start out with Hindustan, written by a songwriter and this man who owned a music shop in Seattle, Washington. His name was Harold Weeks. My friend Johnny Maddox knew Harold Weeks personally because he played in Seattle years ago and gave me an original copy of the tune, Hindustan, from 1917, and then from 1919, one of the biggest hits of all, Dardanella. Someone's asking about what an oriental foxtrot is. Well, it's just a popular tune of the period that has a little bit of oriental harmony to it. That's all there is to it. Now, Dardanella has a unique bass line to it. And Dardanella was written by, I think his name is Johnny S. Black, who later on wrote a famous tune called It's Only a Paper Moon. And then after that, we'll do Japanese Sandman, written by Richard Whiting. And finally, we'll wind up with the greatest of all of them, which is The Sheik of Araby by Ted Snyder, 1921, inspired by, of course, the great silent film star Rudolph Valentino and the Sheik. Now, this all fits in for tonight's concert because any small collection of sheet music from the 1920s is likely to have all of these tunes in it. I have all of these. In fact, I might have a piece of music autographed by Johnny S. Black. I think I do. Oh, I even remembered which one it is. It's a song that he wrote with Van and Skink. So anyhow, here's hoping that you can hear all of this and the internet doesn't cut out. Here's a big medley of oriental foxtrots. you so much. Well, there's some of the classic oriental foxtrots of the 1920s. Someone says, you do the chic proud. Well, I hope so. Well, I also got a request before the concert. This came from Jim Moritz, a new friend of mine, for a song called Get Out and Get Under the Moon. This is from the late 20s. It was a big hit of the period. I love this. And I thought I'd do it as a medley with another tune about the moon. And I haven't played this one in quite some time, so I went and dug out the original sheet music. It's called Keep Sweeping the Cobwebs Off the Moon. And you'll see words by Lewis and Young, but music by Oscar Levant. This is a pop tune that he wrote in 1927. Of course, Oscar Levant went on to be a huge star in movies, primarily as a classical pianist. He became one of George Gershwin's closest friends. But he wrote this great pop tune in the late 20s, Keep Sweeping the Cobwebs Off the Moon. And I'll be playing it as a medley with Get Out and Get Under the Moon. Thank you so much. That was a couple of the moon tunes of the 20s. Well, I'd certainly like to get in some more requests tonight, so please go ahead and send them in. I didn't even know that the Academy Awards was going on tonight. I had no idea, so I really appreciate all of you listening. I've got nearly 100 people here on YouTube, and if you add in about another 35 on Facebook, that's not bad. Let's see, requests, everybody. Go ahead and send them in. Oh yeah, I'm going to do Repeal the Blues. I thought I'd save that for a little later during the concert. If you enjoy the music, I do accept virtual tips for these concerts. All you have to do is send in a tip on PayPal or Venmo, which is in the postings and the chat. And if you don't trust PayPal, I have a P.O. box on my website for checks as well. Let's see, I'm looking at the requests. I don't know some of these by heart, but Leo Roth has asked me to do Swipesy Cakewalk. I could certainly play that again. Maybe I'll go ahead and play that, unless I get another request here in just a minute. No, short and sweet, I don't know that. Let's do Swipesy Cakewalk. I should do a Scott Joplin number tonight. He wrote this with his piano student Arthur Marshall. It's really one of my favorites. And I had never played Swipesy until I went to visit Traber Tishner at his house in St. Louis. And he played for me on an old reel-to-reel tape the recording that he made of an interview with Arthur Marshall. It was done by Traber Tishner and Ragtime Bob Darch. And Bob Darch played Swipesy Cakewalk. And it was just sort of a haunting moment for me, hearing that tape. And I've really always been in love with Swipesy Cakewalk ever since. I do have several different editions of this. I'm not sure that I have quite the first edition. The first edition had both Scott Joplin and Arthur Marshall's pictures on it, but I have like the very next printing with the green cover when they took the pictures off. And there was also several other editions with vaudeville acts on the cover of Swipesy Cakewalk. So that's a little bit about the sheet music. Oh, and I ain't gonna give nobody none of this jelly roll. I'll play that as soon as this one's over. Swipesy Cakewalk. much. There's Swipesy Cakewalk, Scott Joplin and Arthur Marshall. Let me keep playing. In fact, while I've got you all here, before I just give up for the night, I want to play a tune. Kelly Kaufman suggested this to me, and I thought it was a terrific idea. I've never played the tune in honor of Daylight Savings Time. There's this great song from the early 1930s called There Ought to Be a Moonlight Savings Time. Here's the original copy. The song was written by Irving Cahill, Hill, and Harry Richmond, the wonderful vaudevillian I mentioned earlier in tonight's concert. And I love Harry Richmond. He was a little bit similar to Al Jolson in some ways, and he's known for introducing putting on the Ritz. But this is a cute love tune. Of course, Daylight Savings, this was the time that was initiated. The song is 1931, so it had to be around then. There ought to be a moonlight savings time. Thank you so much. There ought to be a moonlight saving time. Isn't that a terrific tune? Well, let me go ahead and play one of the other original pieces of sheet music that I put out on the piano tonight. I don't remember where I bought this. It was probably from one of the sheet music dealers like Waylon Bunnell or Beverly Hamer. And this song was written by John W. Green, a very famous songwriter who wrote tunes like Body and Soul and Out of Nowhere, who went on to work as music director for MGM Studios in Hollywood. And this, however, was written for a radio show in England. The show is called Big Business, and as far as I know, the music was only ever published in England. And the tune is called Repeal the Blues. This is from 1934. It really has that great Art Deco musical style to it. Repeal the Blues. Sounds like a tune of the Depression, doesn't it? Well, go ahead and send me some more requests, folks. Now, yes, it is repealed. The blues have been repealed. I hope so. Go ahead and send me some requests, folks. I'm going to check both YouTube and Facebook. Oh, I'm sorry. Daylight Savings Time was enacted in 1918, not in the 30s. I know there was some debate about it in the 30s, that's for sure. Oh, well, that's an interesting idea. Kelly wants to hear 3 o'clock in the morning. I could do that. Okay, I've got a few ideas here. Got a request for something that stomps. Well, here's a tune, and I know I played it on a virtual concert, but it's been a little while ago. It took me years to find the original sheet music to this. I'm sure I have been looking for it for 15 years, maybe more like 16 or 18 years. Written in 1925 by a 1920s band leader named Elmer Schobel. This is called Everybody Stomp. And it's a great tune. Not very many people have played it over the years. I heard Traber Tishner do it, and I loved his arrangement of it, so I borrowed some of his ideas. Let's do Everybody Stomp. And then I've got a few other things I'm going to do after that. you very much. Everybody stomp. And they sure are in YouTube. Oh, that is so funny. Everybody stomp. Okay. Now, I had mentioned in my announcement for tonight's concert that I might play an early jazz tune called Royal Garden Blues. I do have one of the large format copies of the sheet music. Came out in 1919. Again, that was right when they were switching to the small format music. And this was written by Clarence Williams and Spencer Williams, both from New Orleans, but they were not related to each other. Again, I think Spencer Williams was a fake name. You could look it up, and I'm sure somebody could tell me. But that's what he was known as, so that's what we should call him. And they wrote this great tune. It was named for a nightclub in Chicago, Royal Garden Blues. Thank you very much. Royal Garden Blues. I see a comment from Frank here. No, I wasn't saying Spencer Williams was a fake person. I was saying that wasn't his real name. Somebody look up the biography of Spencer Williams on Professor Bill Edwards' Ragtime website. He's got all the genealogy information and his true name. He wasn't really born in New Orleans, and I think his son was on a TV show, something like Amos and Andy, Spencer Williams Jr. He certainly wrote a lot of great songs. He wrote that one, Basin Street Blues, and so forth. Send me some more requests, folks. It has to be something I kind of know by heart. That's the only rule. If you've never listened to my concerts before, that's kind of the way I do it. You see me using sheet music, especially on a night like tonight, but those are all things that I've practiced ahead of time. Go ahead and give it a shot. Give me some requests here. I'd like to get in a couple more tunes before the concert's over tonight. I know there was a little bit of downtime because of the streaming issues, but I want to keep going. Yeah, Jim, you know, I can play Rain. I know that. I hope you heard Get Out and Get Out of the Moon when I played that for you. Maybe I should do Bill Bailey. That certainly wouldn't hurt. Oh, I played that last week. Maybe I shouldn't do that. Let's see, something Latin. That's a neat idea. I think I'll just play one more song for you before I quit for tonight. I do apologize for the streaming issues. I'll see what I can do about it. Let's end with the beautiful old waltz, 3 o'clock in the morning, which I often use this as my closing song at the Diamond Bell. And the song was a hit for Paul Whiteman in his orchestra in the early 1920s, about 1921. But the tune was actually written in England. It's British in 1920. And I did a little sleuthing online and was able to buy the original British copy of the sheet music to this tune. 3 o'clock in the morning. And that's it for the night, folks. Thank you very much. 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, I really appreciate you, all of you, sticking with me, and I am especially grateful for the virtual tips on a night like tonight when I had streaming issues and the Academy Awards were on at the same time. I appreciate the help with my career on days like this. I'm very grateful, and I will be back next week, same time, same place, with another virtual concert on Sunday night. Good night for now, folks. Thanks.